Welcome fam. Please kindly like the video, subscribe to the channel and leave your comments in the comment section. I still remember how the sun felt that day, warm and bright, mocking the coldness growing in my chest as I stood before our front door. My key slid into the lock but wouldn't turn. Strange. I tried again, jiggling it gently at first, then with increasing desperation. After 10 years of marriage, after the anniversary lunch I'd just eaten alone because Mark was working late, I found myself locked out of my own home. I called his name, knocked, then pounded on the door. Nothing. The perfect suburban silence around me felt suffocating. Our neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, peeked through her curtains, quickly retreating when I caught her eye. I noticed small changes. The garden arrangement shifted, curtains drawn differently than how I'd left them that morning. Pulling out my phone, I called Mark. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "I'm locked out. Where are you?" No response. As panic rose in my throat, I circled to the back door.
Locked.
The windows? Secured. This wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately changed every lock in our house, and on today of all days. 10 years of marriage ended not with a fight, not with tears, but with new locks and silence. I sat on our porch steps, my anniversary dress gathering dust, and tried to understand how the man who'd kissed me goodbye this morning could do this. Had there been signs? The distance between us had grown recently, but this felt extreme, calculated, cruel. We met in college, Mark with his serious eyes and quiet laugh, me with my endless questions and dreams too big for our small campus. Our love story wasn't extraordinary, but it was ours. Study dates became dinner dates, became weekend trips. After graduation, we moved to the city together, taking entry-level jobs and a tiny apartment where we could barely afford the rent. We grew up together, building careers, and eventually buying this house. Our forever home, we'd called it. For years, everything seemed perfect, but perfection is often just careful curation. About a year ago, something shifted. Mark started working later, engaging less. Our conversations became functional rather than intimate. "How was your day?"
Fine.
"What do you want for dinner?" "Whatever's easiest." The silence between words grew heavier than the words themselves. That's when I started the journal, leather-bound, lock and key, hidden in my bedside drawer beneath old photo albums. It began as therapy, a place to pour my frustrations when Mark wouldn't listen. But over time, it became something else, an escape plan. Pages filled with my dreams of freedom, complaints about our stagnant marriage, and eventually, concrete plans to leave after our anniversary. I'd written it all down. The money I'd been secretly saving, the apartment listings I'd circled, the life I imagined without him. After an hour on the porch, my patience snapped. This was MY House 2, damn it. I found a heavy garden stone, and with one decisive swing, shattered the kitchen window. The breaking glass felt cathartic as I carefully cleared away shards and reached through to unlock it. Climbing inside, I called out again, "Mark?" The house responded with eerie stillness. Everything looked untouched at first glance, dishes still in the drying rack, mail stacked on the counter. But as I moved through our home, subtle differences emerged. His coffee mug missing from the dish rack. The bathroom counter cleared of his toiletries. In our bedroom, his closet stood half empty, hangers askew where his suits had hung that morning. Our wedding photo no longer sat on his nightstand. On mine, my jewelry box remained, but when I opened it, The anniversary necklace he'd given me years ago was gone. This wasn't an impulsive act, it was methodical removal. He'd been planning this, calculating his exit while smiling over breakfast, kissing me goodbye while knowing he wouldn't be back. The weight of betrayal pressed against my chest. I sat on our bed, my bed now, and tried to breathe through the panic. 10 years erased in a day. The perfect life I thought we'd built revealed as nothing but cardboard scenery, ready to collapse at the slightest pressure. My journal. The thought struck like lightning. I lunged for my bedside drawer, yanking it open so hard it nearly came off its tracks. I dug past old cards, photographs, pushing aside memories to reach the false bottom I'd installed. Empty. My stomach dropped as I visualized what was written in those pages. Every frustration, every unkind thought, every secret plan. Had he read it? Was that why he'd left? Frantic now, I tore apart the room looking for it. Could I have moved it? No, I always kept it in the same place. I tried to remember what I'd written in my most recent entry. I can't do this anymore. 10 years feels like a lifetime sentence. After our anniversary dinner, I'll tell him I'm leaving. Oh God. I sank to the floor among scattered memories. He knew. He'd found my journal, read my plans to leave him, and decided to beat me to it. The irony was bitter on my tongue. For months I'd fantasized about walking away, but now that he'd gone first, all I felt was hollowed out. I'd written those words during our worst moments, when loneliness felt most acute. They weren't my constant truth, but snippets of despair captured in ink. Context couldn't be explained to someone who wasn't supposed to see those words in the first place. My phone buzzed. Mark's name appeared with a text message that chilled me. I found it. I know everything. 5 words that confirmed my worst fears. I called immediately, straight to voicemail. I texted back, frantic explanations, please to talk, questions about where he was. Nothing. Just silence. The kind of silence that screams. I started calling everyone we knew. His coworkers hadn't seen him. His brother seemed genuinely confused, promising to reach out if he heard anything. Our mutual friends responded with awkward pauses and vague answers that suggested they knew more than they were telling. Had he warned them? Sworn them to secrecy? Had everyone known this was coming except me? With each call, I felt our social fabric unraveling. People we'd hosted for dinner parties and holiday gatherings, now choosing sides in a war I didn't even know we were fighting. One friend hesitantly mentioned, he seemed different lately, determined about something. Another admitted, he asked me some questions about divorce lawyers last month. Last month. While I was planning our anniversary celebration, he was planning his escape. The betrayal burned anew with each revelation. Night fell as I sat in our darkened living room, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had apparently been fiction. The next morning, I discovered the full extent of his preparations. My card was declined at the coffee shop. Our joint accounts frozen. Email passwords changed. Netflix, Spotify, even our Amazon account, all access revoked. I found bank statements showing money gradually moving to an account I didn't recognize over the past 3 months. He'd been liquidating our shared life with surgical precision. Even our shared photo cloud was emptied of everything except pictures of me alone, as if he were digitally removing himself from our history. The calculated nature of it was what hurt most. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision after finding my journal. This was methodical, planned dismantling of our connection. Each discovery was another small death. I slept in my car that night, unable to bear the emptiness of our house. The leather seats cold against my skin, I stared at our darkened windows and wondered how many nights he'd lain awake beside me, planning his exit while I slept. Had he watched me, thinking about the words in my journal? Had he touched my hair, knowing he would soon be gone? The cruelty of his silence was unbearable. If he'd confronted me, yelled, demanded explanations, at least that would have been honest. This ghosting felt like being erased. 2 days passed in limbo. No word from Mark despite my constant messages, ranging from apologetic to angry to desperate. I'd been sleeping in my car, sneaking into the house only to shower and change. On the third morning, standing in our driveway, I suddenly remembered the garage keypad, a simple code combining our birthdays that we'd never bothered to change. With trembling fingers, I punched in the numbers 05120816. The garage door groaned open, revealing not Mark's prized Audi, but something that made my blood run cold. The entire space had been transformed into what looked like a detective's evidence room from a crime drama. Pages from my journal, my private thoughts, were pinned to large cork boards that lined the walls. Red string connected certain entries, with Mark's handwriting scrawled in the margins. Post-it notes, timeline charts, and photographs created a physical manifestation of our disintegrating marriage. In the center of it all stood a single chair facing our oversized wedding portrait, now marked with questions in red marker. Was this ever real? When did you stop loving me? What did I miss? My legs gave way as I took in this museum of betrayal, both his and mine. Each journal entry was meticulously dated, certain passages highlighted in yellow, others underlined in red. His comments in the margins revealed his evolving emotional state. Confused, what does she mean by trapped? Next to an entry from January. Is this about Dan from work? Check phone records, beside a vague mention of someone who understands me. She's been planning this for months, in angry capital letters next to my earliest mentions of leaving. I moved through this grotesque exhibition of our private pain, reading his reactions to my most intimate thoughts. Some notes showed heartbreaking vulnerability. Was it something I did? Can I fix this? Others burned with anger. Liar, said she loved the anniversary gift but wrote here she hated it. Most devastating were the questions that had no answers. Did she ever love me at all? The garage had become a physical manifestation of our broken communication, all the things we should have said to each other displayed in this macabre gallery. In the center, facing our wedding photo, was a notebook open to a page titled simply, "When I Knew It Was Over." I didn't want to read it, but couldn't stop myself from looking. Next to the notebook was a laptop, open but sleeping, with a USB drive inserted labeled simply "Watch Me." I woke the computer and found a single video file. With shaking hands, I pressed play. Mark's face filled the screen, eyes red-rimmed, hair disheveled. "I don't know if you'll ever see this," his recorded self began, "but I need to document my side." What followed was hours of footage, Mark reading my journal entries aloud, his raw emotional reactions captured in real time. I watched him transform from confusion to devastation to a resolved clarity that chilled me. January 15th, he read, voice breaking, "Sometimes when he touches me, I imagine being anywhere else." His face crumpled before he collected himself. Another clip, March 3rd. "I've started putting money aside. By November, I should have enough to start over."
He laughed bitterly at this one.
While I was saving for our anniversary trip, she was saving to leave me. The most recent video showed a different Mark, calm, determined. I've made my decision, he told the camera. If she wants out so badly, I'll give her what she wants. But on my terms, not hers. For the first time, I truly saw myself through his eyes. Not as the unhappy wife I'd become, but as someone who had inflicted deep wounds with my secrets. Halfway through the videos, something caught my attention. Mark was reading an entry I didn't remember writing. Dan says I deserve better. Maybe he's right. Our conversations make me feel alive again in ways Mark never could. I frowned. I knew no Dan. There was another. Fantasized again about telling Mark I'm leaving. The look on his face almost makes me excited. The handwriting looked like mine, but the words felt alien. Scrolling through more footage, I discovered the source, Mark opening what looked like draft emails from my account to someone named Daniel Roberts. With growing horror, I remembered Dan from college. We'd reconnected on Facebook months ago, exchanged a few catching-up messages. Nothing inappropriate, but I'd written draft emails I never sent during particularly lonely nights, emotional thoughts I'd never actually shared. Some were admittedly boundary-crossing in their intimacy. Sometimes I wonder what life would have been like if we'd stayed together. But I'd never sent them. They were just digital bottles for emotions I needed to express somewhere. Mark hadn't just found my journal. He'd found these unsent drafts and merged them into his narrative of my betrayal. The lines between what I'd actually done and what I'd merely thought blurred in his mind until fantasy and reality became indistinguishable. As night fell, I remained in the garage, lost in this archive of misunderstanding. My phone rang, Mark's name lighting up the screen. I answered immediately, heart pounding. Hello. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, you found the garage. His voice sounded distant, controlled. Not the voice of a man in the midst of emotional crisis, but someone on the other side of it. Yes. My voice shook. Mark, we need to talk about this. That's why I'm calling. I needed space to process everything without you influencing my thoughts. No anger, no accusations, just clinical distance. Where are you? I asked. Does it matter? He replied. You were planning to leave anyway. The calm precision of his words hurt more than shouting would have. We agreed to meet the following day at a neutral location. As we hung up, neither of us said goodbye. I spent that night in our bed for the first time since being locked out, surrounded by the half-emptiness he'd left behind. Sleep came in fitful bursts, my dreams filled with red string connecting words I'd written to consequences I'd never imagined. The cafe where we met held a painful symmetry. It was where we'd had our first date 12 years earlier. I arrived early, claiming a corner table, watching the door with each jingle of the bell. When Mark finally walked in, the physical sight of him after days of absence hit me with unexpected force. He looked thinner, his usually clean-shaven face showing stubble, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. He sat across from me, hands wrapped around a coffee mug he didn't drink from. I wasn't going to come, he said finally. Part of me wanted to just disappear, give you the freedom you so clearly want. His voice held no accusation, just exhaustion. Those journal entries, I began, they were your honest thoughts, he interrupted. That's what hurts most. Not that you were planning to leave, but that you never once tried to talk to me about being unhappy. Silence stretched between us, filled with the ambient chatter of strangers living normal lives. I felt the same disconnection, he finally admitted, eyes fixed on his untouched coffee. But instead of planning an escape, I was planning a surprise, a vow renewal ceremony. A second honeymoon to reconnect. He pulled out his phone, showing me emails with travel agents, venue reservations, a custom ring design. The irony crushed what remained of my heart. While I wrote about leaving in my hidden journal, he'd been secretly planning a new beginning. "I brought something for you," Mark said, placing my journal on the table between us. I stared at it like it might bite. "And this." He slid the USB drive next to it, a symbolic returning of my private thoughts. Both those I'd intentionally recorded and those captured without my knowledge. My hands trembled as I reached into my purse, withdrawing a small package. "I have something for you too." Inside was the anniversary gift I'd bought weeks ago, a custom leather notebook with his initials embossed on the cover. The gift felt painfully inadequate now, even naive. "I've been keeping a journal too," he said unexpectedly. "Not as long as yours. I started about 6 months ago when things felt off between us." He placed another notebook on the table, identical to mine, but with his initials. "If you want to read it, you can. Seems only fair." The gesture struck me speechless, offering his private thoughts as voluntary vulnerability after mine had been taken without consent. "I don't know if I should," I whispered. "Mine wasn't meant for you to see." "None of this was meant to happen," he replied simply. "But here we are." The choice hung between us. Whether to perpetuate this cycle of exposed secrets or to find a different path forward. I stared at his journal, understanding that my decision in this moment would set the tone for whatever came next. That night, alone in our house, I read Mark's journal by lamplight. His entries were shorter than mine, more direct, but no less revealing. "Something's wrong with us, but I don't know how to ask what," he'd written 7 months ago. "Tried to talk to Sarah about vacation plans. She seemed distant, changed the subject. Is she bored with me? With us?" As I turned pages, I discovered his perspective on moments I remembered differently, nights I thought he was working late when he was actually giving me space he sensed I wanted. Occasions when he'd planned romantic gestures, but abandoned them after interpreting my mood as unreceptive. Most shocking was his awareness of our problems long before my journal began. "Sarah hasn't laughed, really laughed in months. I miss the sound." The painstaking detail of his anniversary plans filled the most recent pages. Research into recreating our first date, the exact spot of his proposal, contact with old friends to surprise me. Want a reminder of our story, who we were before careers and mortgages complicated everything. Reading his words, I realized how thoroughly we'd failed at understanding each other. Two people narrating completely different versions of the same relationship, neither version fully true nor entirely false. We agreed to meet at home the next evening. The house felt different with both of us in it, not comfortable, but not as empty either. Without discussion, we moved through the rooms together, a strange tour of the space we'd once shared unthinkingly. Each room held memories we now interpreted differently. The kitchen, where I remembered tense silences, he recalled attempting conversations I'd seemed too distracted to engage in. The living room, where I'd felt ignored while he worked, he'd felt unwelcome after too many rebuffs. Our perspectives had diverged so gradually we hadn't noticed we were experiencing entirely different marriages. "I'll sleep in the guest room," he said as evening deepened. Not a question or suggestion, a simple statement of fact. I nodded, relieved and saddened simultaneously. That night, lying awake in our bed while he slept down the hall, the physical distance seemed an accurate representation of our emotional state, still under one roof, but separated by walls of misunderstanding. I wondered if he was awake too, staring at the ceiling, mentally rewriting our history as I was. The house creaked and settled around us, adjusting to the new reality of its occupants, neither together nor fully apart. The garage transformation happened gradually over the following weeks. What began as Mark removing his evidence boards became something unexpected, a shared space where we could communicate without the pressure of immediate response. It started with a simple note I left on the now empty wall. I never sent those emails to Dan. They were drafts I wrote when lonely, but never intended to send.
The N.
The XT day, Mark's response appeared. I believe you, but they still hurt to read. This indirect communication allowed us to express difficult truths the face-to-face conversations we'd attempted kept derailing into defensiveness or tears. A small whiteboard appeared, then another. Soon the garage walls held an evolving dialogue, questions, answers, clarifications without interruption. Why didn't you tell me you were unhappy? He wrote. I tried, but you seemed too busy to hear. I answered. I thought giving you space was what you wanted, he countered. I interpreted space as abandonment, I admitted. The garage became our emotional mediator, allowing us to process at our own pace. Sometimes we'd encounter each other adding or reading notes, acknowledging with nods before retreating to our separate corners of the house. This unconventional approach created a foundation for honesty neither of us had known how to achieve face-to-face. 3 weeks after our separation began, Mark mentioned the anniversary plans he'd made, the vow renewal ceremony at the lakeside park where he'd proposed, reservations at exclusive restaurants, flights to Italy for the second honeymoon. All still booked, all still possible. I don't know what to do about these, he said, spread travel documents on the kitchen table between us. Non-refundable deposits. Decision deadline coming up. The plans represented a future we'd been heading toward in parallel realities, him planning reconnection while I contemplated escape. Now they existed as possibilities neither of us knew how to evaluate. What do you want to do? I asked, the question encompassing far more than travel plans. He considered carefully before answering. I'm not ready to give up on us. But I'm not ready to pretend nothing happened either. His honesty was refreshing after years of polite evasions. Maybe, I suggested hesitantly, we could use the framework but build something different? Not vow renewal, but vow reconsideration. A small smile, the first I'd seen in weeks, crossed his face. Brutally honest vows. For better or worse, but with better communication about which one we're experiencing. For the first time since finding myself locked out, I laughed genuinely. Not because anything was fixed, but because the possibility of fixing things suddenly seemed real. We began keeping companion journals, not replacements for our private ones, but intentional records of thoughts we chose to share. Once a week, we exchanged them, reading each other's reflections without immediate discussion. Writing for an audience changed how we expressed ourselves, more considered, less reactionary, but still honest. My first entry was the hardest. I'm struggling with feeling violated after you read my private journal, while also understanding why you felt betrayed by what you found. His response acknowledged the complexity. I'm ashamed of how I reacted, but still processing the hurt of discovering your escape plans. Each exchange built understanding that years of surface-level conversations had failed to create. Meanwhile, we started couples therapy, a neutral third party to help navigate the landscape we were rediscovering together. "You're doing this backward," our therapist observed. "Most couples separate after failed communication. You're learning to communicate because of separation." She was right. The crisis had forced authenticity neither of us had known how to access before. The process wasn't linear, some days bringing connection, others reopening wounds. I struggled with vulnerability after feeling exposed, while Mark worked to rebuild trust after his dramatic response. But for the first time in years, we were both fully present in the relationship, seeing it clearly rather than through the fog of assumptions. 6 months after being locked out, our home functioned differently. We'd established independent lives under one roof, separate bank accounts alongside the joint one we'd reopened, personal spaces respected alongside shared areas. The garage door, once a symbol of devastating revelation, now represented the boundary between independence and togetherness, a literal and figurative threshold we each crossed by choice rather than obligation. The front door sported new locks with keys we both possessed, Mark's symbolic acknowledgement of his drastic overreaction, my acceptance that we both needed security. We moved around each other with growing comfort, the awkwardness gradually replaced by a different kind of familiarity. More mindful than the automatic patterns we'd fallen into before. "We're not who we were," Mark observed one evening as we cooked dinner together, a reconciliation ritual we'd established. "That might not be a bad thing," I replied, realizing I meant it. The couple who'd stood at that altar 10 years ago couldn't have weathered the storm, too blinded by optimism, too unskilled in the hard work of staying. The people we'd become had lost that innocence but gained something more durable. The capacity to see each other clearly and choose to stay anyway. Our 11th anniversary arrived with neither fanfare nor dread. We'd planned separate celebrations, I with friends who'd supported me through the darkest moments, Mark with family who'd given him perspective when he needed it most. But as evening fell, we both found ourselves drawn home earlier than planned. I arrived to find him sitting in the garage. Our communication space now transformed again with comfortable chairs, soft lighting, and walls displaying selected pages from both our journals alongside photographs spanning our relationship. Our wedding portrait hung center stage, no longer marked with desperate questions, but framed in quiet acknowledgement of both what we'd lost and found. "I wasn't ready to be alone tonight," he admitted as I joined him. "Me neither," I confessed. We sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the evidence of our journey, the painful revelations and gradual healing. "What happens now?" I finally asked. Mark considered the question carefully. "We could sign those divorce papers we've had drawn up for months." A pause. "Or we could keep writing our story, knowing it might end tomorrow or continue for decades." The choice hung between us, neither right nor wrong, just genuinely ours to make. Whatever chapters came next, together or apart, would be written with eyes wide open, seeing each other truly for perhaps the first time. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more authentic relationship stories that explore the complex reality of modern love. Share with someone who might need to hear that relationships require honest communication and constant renewal, not just on anniversaries.
Comment below.
Have you ever discovered something unexpected that completely changed your perspective on a relationship? What did you learn from it? Sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most profound growth.